Radio.
Daylight savings and non-daylight savings. I think daylight savings ends in April,
No,
first Sunday in April. So
no.
this year, pretty much all Ramadan is in daylight savings time, and I think the last few days only. So that's why it's later. So let's get straight into it. How were the Salaf in Ramadan, and where are we going to start?
No. So the example of the Salaf or the pious predecessors, starting from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and onwards, their example in Ramadan is an amazing one, Sheikh. And when you read the biography of some of the great ulama, of the Salaf and the way they treated the month of Ramadan, wallahi, yani, we find some amazing examples, and yani, we find an effort in worship that is very yani, hard to match in this day and age. So if we were to categorize some of the worships and take examples of the Salaf from them in the month of Ramadan, we start first and foremost with the night prayer, Sheikh, praying the night prayers. There's a number of examples of how the Salaf Salih would worship Allah Azza wa Jal or pray the night prayers in the month of Ramadan. If we were to start and take the first example, we have one of the pious predecessors by the name of Abu Uthman al-Nahdi. And Abu Uthman al-Nahdi was one of the companions of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the great companion. This man, Abu Uthman al-Nahdi, he said that he spent as a guest 7 nights in the house of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu throughout the month of Ramadan. And Abu Uthman al-Nahdi, he says, when I was sleeping at Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu's house in the month of Ramadan for 7 nights, I witnessed Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, his wife radiyallahu anha, and their servant. So you had Abu Hurairah, his wife, and their servant. They would split the night into thirds, and each one would pray a third and then wake up the other one. Abu Uthman al-Nahdi said, I witnessed that from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. So this is one of the great examples to show from the Salaf, the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, and in particular Abu Hurairah. For subhanallah, it shows not only the companions' dedication to worshipping Allah for a third of the night in the month of Ramadan, but it also shows his determination to wake up his family. It also shows his determination to wake up his family so that she can take over the following third.
Allahu Akbar. And this shows us that the woman should be active in worship in Ramadan. It's not only about preparing iftar and suhoor, as many people have sadly, restricted the woman or even some of the men in Ramadan, just about food and drink. Shows that it's an opportunity for them to worship Allah as well.
Without a doubt. And there's no doubt that our sisters and our mothers and daughters, they get the reward for what they do and sacrifice in terms of
100%.
preparing the food and that. But in a month like Ramadan, it is definitely not the first and the main objective of this month. Our sisters have to be dedicating time to their worship, from salah, praying their tarawih, whether it's at home, which is best, or in the masjid, or reciting the book of Allah Azza wa Jal and so forth. Like many of our sisters, may Allah reward them, they get very busy throughout the day. They'll have kids, they got to drop off the kids to school, pick up the kids from school, then prepare for iftar and whatever else, and it's by the time the night comes, a lot of them are exhausted and tired. The sisters have to make sure that they can control that and stay on top of it, whereby they don't lose their opportunity of ibadah in this month. And the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum understood the importance of their family worshipping Allah in this month as much as they worshipped Allah. That's why Abu Hurairah would have shifts with his family, subhanallah, in praying the night prayer. And that's also an advice to our brothers to khaffif on their wives as well. Yani, if your wife didn't make you a lamb roast one day, or a farrouj, or whatever it might be, yani, you don't need to kick up a big fuss over it. There has to be time first and foremost for worship.
Allah, Shaykh, I just now this example that you gave Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh, splitting the nights into a third, and the ayah وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, cooperate in righteousness and good deeds, and the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is in Ramadan and out of Ramadan, that we should cooperate, help, assist one another in the performance of good deeds and having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ramadan is the month of taqwa.
Without a doubt, Sheikh. perfect example to use the verse about working together upon righteousness. And if you are to work with someone upon righteousness, the most worthy people to work with is your family first and foremost, before anyone else.
So, dear brothers and sisters, tonight let's try to implement the example of Abu Hurairah
radiyallahu ta'ala.
If you haven't prayed the night prayer yet for whatever reason, you've got the first shift from 10:30 after the program finishes to 1:30. Then your wife can have the last shift, so it meets with suhoor, so you can still have your suhoor. And Allahu Alam, who else is in your house, you can get up in the middle part there.
If there's any slaves or servants
or maybe a relative or a younger son, older daughter, whatever it may be. May Allah allow us to live like the Salaf at all times in belief, speech and actions.
Ameen.
Sheikh, what's next, Sheikh?
Another example, Sheikh, regarding the night prayer is an example by one of the Salaf whose name was Shaddad ibn Aus, rahimahullah. Shaddad ibn Aus, as his own family narrated, he would go to bed in Ramadan, and then he would be like a nut in a pan. This is how his family described him. When you put a peanut or a nut in a hot pan, it's going to flip. In other words, he would not be able to sleep. And his family said, then he would get up and he will say, "Oh Allah, Jahannam has not allowed me to sleep." And then he will engage in his salah. Subhanallah, this is what would concern them and what would be on their mind. And that's what they would lose sleep over, thinking about the hellfire. Whereas many today, they're losing sleep over not making enough money today at work, or losing a business deal, or whatever other affairs from the dunya that tend to make people lose sleep. But when you look at the pious predecessors, wallahi, what made them lose sleep was their fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. And it used to make them get up, actually physically get up because they couldn't sleep, and rush to the salah.
So this shows their constructive fear, because they didn't just sit back and do nothing and just fall into despair. They actually worked, they fled to Allah with good actions. And Allahu Akbar, that's an amazing example there. So we all have to fear the hellfire, but many of us, it's just on the lips. These pious predecessors, it was in action. Allahu Akbar. What else do we have, Sheikh?
Another one regarding the night prayer was the son of Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Abdullah. Abdullah, the son of the great companion Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, he said, "I heard my father say." So Abdullah is referring to his father Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. "I heard my father say, we would finish praying qiyam in Ramadan." So if Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu is saying we would, who's he referring to? The Sahaba. He said we would finish praying qiyam in Ramadan, and by the time we finished, the servants would be rushing with food for suhoor before Fajr. And that's an indication that their qiyam would last the entire night. By the time they finished, they're rushing to have their suhoor. Subhanallah, that's another one of the examples of the pious predecessors, and again from the Sahaba. If this is how the Sahaba prayed their night prayers in the month of Ramadan, then where are we? Sometimes the nafs finds it hard to stand with the Imam for the 8 rak'at of Taraweeh, which most of the mashayikh in the Marakiz and Masajid, may Allah reward them, they khaffif the tilawa and they take the people into consideration, and they're praying light and people still not happy, Sheikh. People still complain and whatever else. For the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they used to look forward to these opportunities. They used to stand in salah, they used to pray their qiyam from after Isha, and by the time they finish, it's time for suhoor. And that's what the son of Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu narrated from his father.
Sheikh, I don't want to jump the gun, because I know soon you will speak about the Quran bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
Naam.
But is the main difference, there's many differences, but is one of the main differences between the Sahaba and the Muslims of today their application or their relationship with the Quran?
Without a doubt, Sheikh, 100%. If we were to look at the reality there is more huffaz of the Quran today than there is from the Sahaba. Yeah? Not all the companions memorized the Quran entirely, but all of the companions implemented the Quran entirely. This is something that I had benefited from one of my teachers overseas, and that's the difference. You have people who memorize the Quran, but their implementation is very minimal. This is what is common in our time, in our day and age. Whereas the companions, the memorizers of the Quran were minimal, but the implementation of the Quran and the Sunnah was widespread amongst all of them.
So they were truly the Quranic generation in all reality.
Without a doubt. And we all know the famous saying of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, that we would not memorize 10 verses. If we memorize 10 verses, we will not move to the next 10 unless we understood those 10 that we memorized and we implemented them.
So this then would then link into the salah, because they would have the taste of the prayer.
Naam.
Because they had that sweetness of the reciting of the Quran.
Naam.
And reciting it not just for the one aspect, which is to recite it, but also to understand, ponder, implement, and most importantly, which they were known for, as you just mentioned, the acting, implementing of the Quran.
For what other reason was the Quran sent down, Sheikh? Before its reciting, before its memorizing, it was sent down as a book, as a guide.
Huda.
Huda and amal, for us to act upon it. We have great shortcomings if we focus on reading the Quran, memorizing the Quran, but we neglect the most important aspect of the Quran, which is the amal by the Quran.
Sheikh, do you have any more examples of the Salaf in prayer in Ramadan? Or one more before we move on to the next topic, inshallah.
Nah.
Bismillah.
Abdul Rahman ibn Hurmuz, rahimahullah, from the Salaf, he said the reciters, yani the ones that would lead the Taraweeh, they would complete the Baqarah in 8 units, in 8 rak'at. He said, and if they completed the Baqarah in 12 rak'at, we would say, the Sheikh took it easy on us. That's just another example to show the dedication and the commitment of the pious predecessors and how they will take advantage of the blessed month of Ramadan.
Allah, that's what Surah Al-Baqarah is 2.5 ajza, Sheikh, isn't that right?
Correct.
40-50 pages, correct. Something like that.
Correct.
In 8 rak'ah. And I honestly believe that their level of iman and their understanding, implementation of the Quran is probably be what we see as half an hour today or 40 minutes.
SubhanAllah.
Wallahu alam. Let's move on to the next point, Sheikh, for tonight in the Salaf's relationship or the Salaf in Ramadan.
The next point, Sheikh, is regarding the reciting of the Quran in Ramadan from the Salaf. And the first example that we give is none other than An-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Fatima radiallahu anha, she narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam informed her that Jibreel alayhi salam would revise the Quran with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam once a year. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught his daughter that the angel Jibreel would revise the Quran with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam once a year. And the year that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed away, Jibreel alayhi salam revised it with him twice. And regarding this, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said the revision between the Prophet ﷺ and the angel Jibreel was always at night. This teaches us that the month of Ramadan, the greatest time for the Quran is the evening. No doubt the day also, but the evening is much more emphasized. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ used to revise the Quran with Jibreel alayhi salam in the evenings.
That's excellent, subhanallah al-azim. And as you mentioned there, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would recite the Quran to Jibreel and twice in the year that he died. This shows us that it is highly recommended to recite the Quran in Ramadan, as well it is the month of the Quran, which really gives that extra the great emphasis of this month, and makes this month even more special, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to reveal His words in this blessed month of Ramadan.
Without a doubt. We know one of the nicknames of Ramadan is the month of the Quran, because like you said, Sheikh, it is the month the Quran was revealed. Without a doubt, if we are to focus on anything more than anything else, it is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this month. And that's why we have some of the great examples of the Salaf who understood the importance of reading the Quran in Ramadan for that reason. And again, amazing examples from the Salaf.
Sheikh, before you give us some examples of how the Salaf were with the Quran in Ramadan, we want the listeners as well not to fall into what many of us may fall into, in that's the Salaf, that's the best generation. Who am I? We want them to have the attitude that I'm going to take something from them.
No.
It may be not the complete reciting Surah Al-Baqarah mathalan in one night,
no.
but take something that in making Ramadan special with the acts of prayer and all the rewards for it and the Quran. So how were the Salaf, Sheikh, with the Quran in Ramadan?
Just on that point that you just mentioned, an excellent point. The Salaf were flesh and bone just like us, Sheikh. They weren't malaika, they weren't angels, they weren't given special powers from Allah Azza wa Jal. But the difference is the dedication and the commitment and being convinced in the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. If we are to take some of the examples, one of them is one of the Salaf by the name of Al-Aswad ibn Yazid. Al-Aswad ibn Yazid, rahimahullah, it's narrated that he would complete the Quran in Ramadan every second night. And what helped him to do that is he would sleep between Maghrib and Isha. So he would break his fast, sleep, wake up for Isha, spend the night in Salah, reciting the book, and the rest of the day. He would limit his sleep to between Maghrib and Isha. Subhanallah. And based on that, he was given the strength from Allah Azza wa Jal to be able to complete the Quran every second night. Another example is Malik ibn Anas, the great Imam. The great Imam Malik, whenever Ramadan entered, he would leave off seeking knowledge. So these are the great Imams, the great scholars of Islam. Whenever the month of Ramadan entered, they would no longer seek knowledge, and they will dedicate their time, and he will dedicate his time to reciting Quran from the Mus'haf. And that's an example to show that this is given priority over everything else. For we know how great seeking knowledge is and teaching knowledge, the greatness of it, but yet they will put it on the side in the month of Ramadan to focus on themselves and their recitation of the book of Allah Azza wa Jal.
So what about the other stuff that is nothing like seeking knowledge, from the hobbies and the other pursuits that we may have, especially if they're haram? It's even worse. But shouldn't we leave them aside and try to concentrate on the Quran in Ramadan as well? Taking the example of Imam Malik rahimahullah.
Subhanallah. For they left righteous actions to increase in righteous actions. We can't leave haram to increase in righteous actions. Subhanallah.
That puts everything into perspective in reality.
Subhanallah.
So let us, my dear brothers and sisters, leave off that which is not going to bring us a benefit, whether it's this or that. Especially if it's haram, you're going to be harming yourself, and go to that which is going to be the greatest benefit for you, especially in this month, the month of the Quran. What other examples do we have, Shaykh, of the Salaf in Ramadan with the Quran?
The great Imam Sa'id ibn Jubair, rahimahullah. For those that don't know Imam Sa'id ibn Jubair, he's one of the great muhaddithin of the Salaf from the Tabi'een, and he would complete the Quran every second day in Ramadan also. Subhanallah, this is a great example of their dedication. And we also have Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik, who would complete the Quran 17 times in Ramadan.
17 times.
17 times. And when we say complete, ya Shaykh, we know for a fact their recitation is not like ours. Their recitation is with tadabbur. It's with reflecting and pondering over the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they understood the Quran and its meaning. To be able to do that, يعني to reflect over the ayat and to be able to complete the Quran that many times with tadabbur, this is without a doubt a ni'mah and a gift that Allah Azza wa Jal gifts who He wants.
One time would be enough for us with tadabbur.
Without a doubt, Shaykh.
And trying to understand what we're reading, which will bring tadabbur bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. What other examples do we have, Shaykh, of the Salaf in Ramadan?
Just one more, Shaykh, regarding the Quran, the great Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah. The great Imam al-Bukhari, and personally this was the most amount that I came across in research for dedication to the reciting of the Quran. In other words, I did not come across anyone who would complete the Quran more than Imam al-Bukhari. That's probably something for the brothers and the sisters. If they can do some research and they can come up with someone who exceeded Imam al-Bukhari, we would love to. It's
going to be quite hard.
We would love to come across it, inshallah. Has to be an authentic narration.
Yes, especially when you're dealing with Imam Bukhari.
Naam, without a doubt. Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, would complete the Quran every day in Ramadan during the day, and after Taraweeh, he would complete it every 3 nights.
Oh, Akbar. So during the day once?
During the day once, and after Taraweeh, once every 3 days. Yeah. I calculated that was 40 completions in the month. So 30 in the day and 10 in the evening throughout the month of Ramadan. Rahmatullah alayh.
And he's the author of the greatest book, the most authentic book after the Quran itself.
Naam.
So this shows you his attachment to the Quran, which put blessings in his life and allowed him to complete the great task of preserving the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and authoring a book that is, with us today. And Allahu Akbar.
The most authentic book after the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, as the scholars call it.
Shaykh, these are some beautiful examples. We ask Allah to allow us to, implement some of what we have heard today in regards to the Salaf in Ramadan with the prayer and with the Quran. Anything else, Shaykh, you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Barakallah feek, Shaykh. Like you touched upon, these examples are not just for us to be mesmerized and amazed by them. They're for us to try to take something and implement it in our life, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Jazakallah khairan, Shaykh. It's always good having you with us, and the Shaykh will be with us Friday night, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, for more of the Salaf in Ramadan. I'd like to thank our tech team and all the brothers who tuned in to Albayan Radio tonight. Don't forget to download our app at the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, and also to tune in to us on Facebook, ASWJ Australia, and also our own Facebook page, Albayan Radio Australia, and also to download our podcasts as well, where you can watch and listen on YouTube as well, YouTube Australia, Albayan Radio Australia, and wherever else you may find our podcast. Barakallah feekum, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.